Hey, Rooted podcasters. I'm back with another episode of Rooted. Glad you are here today. Come in close. Come on in if you can. Just move on in. I've got a secret. Leadership is hard, and sometimes it frankly sucks. I don't think we say that enough, right? Because a lot of people aspire to leadership and you're supposed to be a leader. We ponder if leaders are born or made. And there's a lot of leadership books out on those shelves and a lot of classes on leadership. And sometimes what we need to say is just that leadership is complex and challenging and hard. And in a workplace where there is now 7 or 8 generations represented, where we are at the intersection of a new time in our country, where we are really leaning in on what belonging and justice is. And we are trying to grapple with what that looks and sounds like in our organizational cultures. We are addressing the potential of economic downturn and challenge. We have the digital age that comes into the space and navigating AI and making sure that we're being collaborative and making sure that we're hitting our goals. Leadership is hard. And I have been on the leadership path a long time, whether it's been facilitating leadership programs and writing curriculum or leading a small team or a large team. And let me tell you that the first several times, my first several leadership details, I sucked. I look back on those experiences and think to myself, oh my goodness, what was I doing? And people don't admit that either. I don't care how many classes you take. I don't care how many concepts you apply. The entire body of work around leadership is multifaceted and challenging and difficult and nuanced, and we don't talk about it enough. And one of the things that I've noticed is that in a lot of situations, leaders are missing some opportunities to be more engaged and be more aligned with the people that you're leading. And it scares me because not only does it not set a good example for other people to want to aspire to leadership, it's a drain on our own leadership journeys when we don't think more mindfully about how we show up as leaders. And so I want to talk a little bit about the importance of conscious leadership. And what I often encounter in organizations when I'm asked to come in is that there is a lot of room for growth for leaders around self-awareness. Some of the most manipulative, gaslighting, disrespectful, biased leaders are made from a lack of self-awareness, that they have an inability to acknowledge their own emotions and feelings. They can't name their strengths and weaknesses or what they value. And it absolutely spews onto the team and the people that they're leading in ways that is so hard to watch. We don't give enough credence to the fact that we are a product of our environment and what we've been exposed to and what we've been conditioned to. And then we bring all that with us into the workplace. I often sit in leadership classes and ask people, do they believe if leaders are born or made? And I will make them go to either side of the room and actually substantiate their decision around if leaders are born or made. Why do I have people do that? Because your construct around that alone informs how you lead. If you think leaders are born and you just have natural ability and that's it, then somebody that might be struggling on your team, you might have a different approach that's unconscious and negative if you think leaders are born. If you think leaders are made, you might have some different perspective around what you think somebody might need or not need as it relates to training. Neither is good or bad, but the awareness around that is critical. So when I talk about conscious leadership, I am talking about first step, radical self-awareness. Radical. I mean, you are really assessing how you communicate, how you name directives, how you might be lacking in decision making because you don't want to have the fallout and accountability if you pick wrong. You might be speaking in directive, but giving off a feeling of suggestion. And then you get mad when the people you're leading don't respond. Self-awareness, and I mean radical self-awareness to a conscious leader is absolutely essential. The next piece for a conscious leader is empathy. We throw this around a lot. People have weaponized it and misused it, but the bottom line is empathy is simply the ability to understand and hold space for someone's feelings. And even if you don't understand their feelings fully, you don't dismiss those feelings just because you don't have those feelings. Empathy for a conscious leader is important. It's actually a superpower. Empathy isn't weakness. Empathy is strength. Integrity, adhering to ethical standards and principles, doing what's right when nobody's looking, considering the impact of what happens when your values and your behaviors are incongruent and doing something about it. A conscious leader bathes in integrity, makes the right call of fairness even when it's uncomfortable. Transparency. I get it. I get pushback on this all the time. Pam, I can't be transparent. It's confidential. You're confusing transparency and disclosure. Of course you can't disclose everything. Of course you can't. But can you be transparent about that and why? You know, the idea of saying because I said so becomes a strategy that's not helpful after a person is 2 years old. That's right. The data says that after 2 years old, when rational thinking comes into place, because I said so or because I told you to do it, becomes a really disrespectful and challenging answer in an adult workplace. So, are you being transparent? Are you transparent when you don't know the answer? Are you transparent when it's going to be longer than you thought it was going to be? Are you transparent when you made a mistake that deserves an apology? A lot of leaders who are unconscious in their leadership confuse transparency and disclosure. I see it all the time. Another way to be a conscious leader is to be adaptable. Have you really assessed how well you would handle change, how flexible and adaptable you are, how well you're willing to change and evolve through change for the greater good? Or are you change adverse anytime that it's something that you don't want to do? Adaptability is critical for a conscious leader. How do you measure up? What's your threshold for change? How do you execute change in an environment where change happens rapidly? Another aspect of conscious leadership is that you have a visionary spirit, that you can see a vision, that you can create a vision, that you have the ability to create a visionary landscape, and that it's compelling to the people that you're leading. Oh, I see people all the time that have all these credentials and the Ivy League school and can operate tactically, but have no vision. You know what the first rule of leadership is? that people are willing to follow you. If you don't have that, you got nothing. So being able to be a visionary is really important as it relates to conscious leadership. And finally, a core aspect of conscious leadership is accountability, accountability, accountability. Simply taking responsibility for one's actions, behaviors, or lack thereof, and owning it. This is a tough one. If I could go back on several different leadership details and say to the team, I didn't have the courage to say I didn't know, I believe it would have transformed not only my experience, but their experience. So are you a conscious leader? Do you operate in the space of radical self-awareness? Do you have empathy and integrity and transparency and adaptability and vision, and most of all, accountability? Conscious leadership means that you are willing to recognize the humanity of the people you're leading. And sometimes recognizing the humanity of the people you're leading means letting them go too, humanely, with their dignity intact. Conscious leadership, self-awareness, empathy, integrity, transparency, adaptability, vision, and accountability. Rooted Podcasters, I hope you take the time to think about what you think regarding this topic. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time.